Namaste and in Laquette, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and I will not share what those two phrases mean. I will refer you to previous episodes for more exposure and for you to find out exactly what they do mean, and perhaps even apply those in your life. You'll get great results, I'll guarantee it. Thanks for tuning in. So this week's guest is Limor Bergman Gross, who moved to the States from Israel and then went back and is serving a wonderful population there in the diversity, equity, and inclusion realm, especially women in technology. She says, I lead women in tech leadership to get to the next level in their careers and achieve more through a result-oriented process. She works with Power to Fly, which is in Central Israel, as a director of product business development. And she's also principal of the LBG Consulting Services currently. And she was the director of cloud compute for DigitalOcean. She's also got a bachelor's in computer science from the Tel Aviv University. Limor, glad to have you here.
Hi, Zen. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here tonight.
Oh, it's a pleasure for me to have such rich conversations with people from all over the world on topics that really matter that we don't talk about much, right? So speaking about don't talk about much, this has to do with the development of your connection internally with the external world, and that happens in a lot of different ways for people. Most of us recognize it young and then kind of forget about it as we grow with, responsibilities and duties in the world. And then at a certain point, we tend to return to that once we've gotten through the, most people for the childbearing years, right? The empty nesting in the mid 40s. I had a gentleman, psychiatrist I saw just after my awakening is at 18 that told me, you've had a spiritual awakening. Why so young? I don't know, because most people don't go through it till their mid 40s, if they ever do. And I didn't understand that at the time. And then once I became a parent and hit the mid 40s, oh yeah, I get it. That's when everything else is done and you're looking for something new, right? So how did it start for you? And did you notice things when you were a child as you were growing up? And I know, your tradition is rich with that inner quest and questions, right?
I wasn't really questioning much when I was a child. I was, I would say, very obedient girl and wanted to make my parents proud of me. So I don't think I questioned much, to be honest with you.
Okay, well, most kids, tend to want to emulate their parents in some way.
Yeah.
Too. So when did it first begin, or when did you first start noticing that there was maybe a little bit more within you and how you might have developed that internal quest and conversation?
Yeah, I think that it happened, as you mentioned, in my 40s. So at the beginning of my 40s, and I'm now reaching the ends of my 40s. So,
Right.
So I didn't question much. I started a career. I got married and started having kids, and those years you're busy with the kids, you don't have time to question anything. You're just trying to survive, work and kids and family and all that. So
and make it all work, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
That you can, especially with kids.
Yeah. So when we moved to the US, I was actually not in my 40s yet. I was towards the end of my 30s. And I looked for a job in the US, started working, as a manager. And, then a few years later, I started to really think if that's what I wanted, if that's the only thing I could do,
Right.
if there's more in me to give back to others, and if there's more in life for me.
Sure. I had a mentor one time that said to me, why should you be doing well what you shouldn't be doing at all? right? So that kind of wait a minute, what's that mean? Well, you've just kind of expressed that, right? You questioned where you were at in your professional career.
Yeah.
So how did that change take place? What did you go through internally in that process? Because this is something that, each of us go through, but we don't really share what's going on because we generally don't have anybody to talk to about it, except our
Yeah.
spouse or
So
or
yeah, I was talking, me and my husband talking a lot about it. And I think for me, it was an exploration. I wasn't really sure, I mean, what I would do and what I am capable of, other than, leading engineering teams. And it was, paying well, and also scary, right? To try something else. So I tried
especially
different
for a woman in
things.
an industry that's male dominated.
Yeah. Yeah. So I tried different things. Real estate, selling on Amazon, different things, right? I mean, I tried different things. And the interesting thing was that I wasn't persistent in that, because I guess it wasn't meant to be, and I wasn't really enjoying it.
You didn't have a passion for it.
I didn't have a passion for it, and just doing something for making a living, it's not good enough, right? I mean, it will not hold water for the long haul, and when you're facing challenges.
Hmm.
So it
Now,
just
that kind
didn't.
of attitude, though, does work when you're younger because there's not that opportunity to really explore, especially when you've got the duties and responsibilities of parenthood.
Yeah. 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 So I tried different things as I was still, working and all that, and raising a family. And it happened kind of coincidentally, to be honest with you. Uh,
Coincidence? Or really? I don't know about that. Right. Because it's synchronicities really that lead us from one place to another when we're paying attention.
yeah, that's true. Yeah. So I was approached by a company at the beginning of actually, maybe it was beginning of 2017, I think, or end of 2016. And they offered me to mentor engineering managers as a volunteer, completely for free. I mean, and I was intrigued. I said, yeah, sounds interesting. And I started mentoring. And I remember that I was talking with a colleague that they approached him too, and asked me, have they approached you? I mean, are you doing this? And I said, yeah, why not? And he said, well, they're not paying anything. Why should I bother? And I was like, interesting kind of thinking. I wasn't thinking about getting paid like money. I was
Right.
thinking about getting paid by experiences, right? I mean, I was
Sure.
thinking of, oh, that sounds like a great experience that I would like to have, mentoring others that is not part of my day-to-day job. And, as a manager, people I don't know, and exposing myself to new experiences. And I started mentoring, and I found out several things. First, I found I bring tremendous value because I was getting feedback from people I mentored, how much I helped them. Second thing is that I really liked it. I enjoyed it. Every time I was able to help someone make progress, small to big, it filled me with, gratitude. And I was so thrilled that I'm able to make an impact.
It's wonderful how that happens, isn't it?
Yeah. And I realized, well, if I'm willing to do that for free and I'm good at this, why not make a living out of it? It took me several years, by the way, to think about that.
Sure.
It didn't happen overnight. But that's kind of what happened when I moved back to Israel. And I guess making huge changes in your life, for me at least, helps me kind of think of let's open everything up, right? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
it
changing
really
countries.
does. It gives you that opportunity to explore all kinds of things as you're being curious, inquisitive, explorative, and stepping into the unknown with a fearless attitude, right? Because
Yeah.
all of these things, when you're, I see it as focusing your attention, intention, and interaction on a goal, and that goal is generally simply fulfillment, right? And then just with that alone, all of these coincidences seem to begin to pop up. So
Yeah.
how was that for you? Describe that process a little bit.
So I knew that I knew that I didn't want to continue on the career path I was at. So I was a director of engineering, and I knew that I had to leave because moving to Israel, although I was working fully remote back then, still like working US hours, and Israel weekdays are different. It's Sunday through Thursday, and the rest of the world is Monday to Friday. So saying, okay, working Friday nights, that's not gonna work. And every day working nights. And I tried it for a while, for a few weeks, but I realized really I cannot do that. And I didn't want to interview for new jobs in Israel.
Mhm.
I remember people reaching out, hey, so great you're back. Come to my company, come to my, and I said, oh,
Isn't
okay.
that great to have that though? I mean, to have
It
people
is.
reaching out to you
It is.
to say, hey, it gives you a sense of, oh yeah, I do have value, right?
I knew that I had value and I still do, but something inside me was
Well, it's a
resisting
confirmation
that.
of
Yeah.
that in your knowing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I said, well, maybe I'll check it out. And I went to a few companies, and then I said, no, I cannot do that. It's just not for me. It was not for me. And I was in touch with Power to Fly because I work with them as a client. I'm very passionate about women in the tech industry and helping women grow.
Mhm.
And I reached out to their CEO, which I knew, and we connected. We met in New York, and I reached out and said, hey, I am leaving the company I'm at. Just FYI. I wasn't even expecting anything from her. I just told her because I was pushing really hard with the company I was working at, their relationship with Power to Fly, and I was a major driver for that. So I told her, hey, I'm not disappearing. I'm just leaving that company. I said, hey, are you open to talking with me and figuring out what's your next move? And I said, yeah, sure. And I talked to her, and she offered me to work with her, but she wasn't really sure what. And that's how I ended up starting consulting to them and creating a mentorship program for women, because I had a lot of experience with mentorship.
Sure, it was the logical next step, right? When you, and you may not have realized it in the process, or maybe you did, or had that, and this is where the inner awareness kicks in,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
that, it's, I've heard it called an empathic resonance.
What does it mean?
Well, the empathy, right, is being able to
Mm-hmm.
sense and feel, right? And the resonance is something that gives you a sense of direction, fulfillment, inclusion, right? Acknowledgement. And so
Mm-hmm.
all of these things kind of fit in. It's really, when you're exploring the inner and outer world bridging, there's really not been a whole lot of language developed in order to facilitate that, because the two are kind of like church and state, right? They've been kept separate. And yet we live half inside and half outside as one whole being. So to include the other half that we don't pay attention to might actually have a profound effect on how we're living in the outer world. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this kind of process, it seems like that's what's taking place. So what happened as a result of that, and how did that, specifically referencing the empathic resonance, what did you sense was happening internally as this process was taking place?
So I sense that I gathered experience, in engineering leadership, and I gather experience in mentorship, and I have the passion to support women, and it was kind of connecting all the dots together.
Like the trifecta, huh?
Yeah. So I figured, well, I actually offered them, okay, let me create a mentorship program from scratch with all my experience. I mean, let's just do it. And I was very fortunate that she and her co-founder gave me, they trusted me, and they gave me the space to create something. And well, while I was doing that, I started thinking, okay, that actually is something that I can actually do with other companies, and I can actually do different things, because
Mhm.
and also another thing that happened to me kind of coincidentally is that I was talking with another company about helping them with mentorship for women. And they asked me if I have a coaching certification. And I didn't back then. Now I do. And I said, interesting. So they rejected me. And I said, I always look at, you know, things that happen to you both ways, but, you know, things that are happening to you and you think, oh, it's a negative thing or rejection. What is the good, what is
There's
the
always
great
a
thing that
silver lining.
happened? Yeah.
There's always a silver lining in something when we can step back and open ourselves up to actually look for it. The tendency, it seems, is to the, oh, woe is me kind of, woe is me anyway, that tends to be self-deprecating instead of looking at it as, okay, that didn't work, but I learned this. How can I apply that? Right? And so how did that transpire?
So when that happened, I was like, okay, great. I realized what's my next step. So, I mean, I realized that coaching certification may actually be a next step for me.
Sure.
To
and you've had a
upskill.
life too in order to become the coach. You know,
Yeah.
I had a question asked me, and this has been some while ago, and talking about coaching and even authorship and coaching, especially as a life coach. And my response was, you know, the question was, what's your best advice? And I said, have a life first.
That's a
Many
good one.
people are getting coaching certifications and they don't have the life experience to really have the kind of expansive database, if you will, of experience in order to draw from, which is really helpful.
Yeah. So I realized that I needed a coaching certificate. I don't know if needed is the, but I wanted it. Let's put it that way.
Sure.
It made sense to get to upskill, get also the certification. It's not just for the certification. I said, that's going to help because there is like a stamp that, okay, someone stamps me with, okay, I can coach. Although, you know, obviously with, as you said, with the life experiences, a lot of times we can do it even without it. But said, okay, let's do it. And I just signed up. By the way, I didn't do a research at all. I just went to, I knew that I wanted to do something face-to-face, not remote. I wanted the experience, right, in meeting others and exploring it and practicing and all that. And I Googled coaching. And one of the results that I got was from a school that this person is called Alon Ullman. He's very famous in Israel. I don't know if he's famous worldwide. I think less so. But I read his book several years prior. And he's all about the self-improvement, similar to Tony Robbins, but locally in Israel. And I said, well, if he has a coaching school, I mean, it's probably good. And I should go. And that's what I did. I just went and signed up.
Let's unpack that a little bit, because this is important in the internal decision-making process, right? I want to explore that just a little bit. And because there's one thing to think, there's another to feel. And when the two align, then that's where the magic happens, right? So as you're going through this process, what thoughts were you thinking, and how did that resonance occur in your body when those choices that were the most powerful for you appeared?
So I was thinking that because of the brand of this person and what this person is doing, it's probably there's some credibility, right? Because I read his book, and he has a very interesting life journey, and he became very, very successful. And I said, okay, it must be good. So I had a strong feeling of confidence that I'm making a good decision. It cannot be bad. It's a good decision. On top of that, what I really liked is that they had a process, an acceptance process. for someone who wanted to go into their program.
Mm-hmm.
And I like that, although I was 100% that they will accept me. But I like that they had the process in place, because I said, it means that they don't just take anyone that wants to become a coach.
Sure. So that was kind of an internal validation point, right?
Yes, yes. And as you said, right, I mean, you bring all your experiences, and I strongly believe that you can be a coach when you actually live the life and you gain experiences that you can actually bring and help others. Otherwise, you can take an 18-year-old and they go through coaching certification, they get certified and they start coaching, but they don't have all the experiences in their life. They
Mm-hmm.
have some, but how can they help, someone else? And yeah, so
Well, there's probably an occasion, not everyone is like this, but I've found that there are some younger that carry great wisdom and that ask great questions. They may not have the life experience to back up the questions with examples from their own life, but they've got the ability to ask the questions, and that's kind of profound in some cases, right?
Yeah, I'm sure that there are exceptions, but in general, yeah. So I had a strong feeling that that's what I needed to do, and the decision was very quick. And it was very expensive, by the way. I think it's one of the most expensive programs here in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I just decided I'm signing up, and it was also, the timing was kind of very close to the beginning of the next training.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a lot of time, but sometimes it's a good thing, right? It forces you to make quick decisions.
Well, yeah, and it's that following the coincidence or synchronicity, and ultimately it seems, and maybe you'll validate this, that flow tends to be what you're looking for in that. We don't always recognize it in process, and yet that's kind of what we seek. There's this natural sense of, yeah, this is the direction I need to go, and everything kind of shows up to allow you to do that, right? And it's not necessarily that it's your timing or its timing, but it's a collective timing of your own personal advancement.
Yeah, and you mentioned the word flow. I really believe in flow. On one hand, I want to be intentional about my career and what I do, but on the other hand, I want to flow with opportunities, with things that come into my life. And this is one example. Another example, I got introduced at some point with a wonderful woman who is running presentation skills workshops. And I love public speaking. I think it's a skill that everyone should have. And I'm always looking for opportunities to speak.
Interesting thing that, speaking of fearless, and I know at least these are the stats in America, maybe globally, I'm not sure. However, there's the top 3 fears in life. The first one's public speaking, above death and divorce. Right? Imagine that, right?
Yeah, I can imagine that, because many people, fear that. And I met her. She went, to a speaking event that I was speaking at. It was a virtual thing, and she was impressed, and she said, "Oh, you have to work with me." And that's how I started also to run workshops on presentation skills. And it just happened, right? I mean, I just opened my mind to the opportunity, and I say, why not? Although, I never did it before.
Why not?
But why not?
Why not? Right? Yeah, exactly. So how did that internally bring you to a greater sense of fulfillment in the process?
Because I felt like, okay, I can do coaching, but I can also do workshops, and I can help in other ways. So it kind of opened my mind to possibilities that are beyond just one thing. And I really believe in possibilities, and that we are multidimensional, right? I mean, creatures, and we have so much to give.
Oh, you're speaking to my heart and my soul in that, because, well, one of my taglines for my coaching is mold possibilities into reality. And I've been labeled a possibilities coagulator. So it really connects with me. Thank you. Carry on. I just had.
Yeah, so I realized just, okay, it opened my mind to possibilities that, oh, I can do coaching. I can create or help companies create mentorship program. I can run workshops on presentation skills. And if I do that, okay, I can actually run workshops on leadership and other topics, right? I mean, so it opened up my mind to possibilities that are available for me. And there are probably 1,000 more things I can do and I'm not thinking of right now.
Well,
but I'm trying to
you'll
keep
find
my
them.
mind open, right? I mean, and things will just happen. Opportunities will just introduce themselves to me.
And you were able to have the attention and the awareness of that, rather than you're looking at the horizon, right? You're looking at what's showing up in front of you. This is one of the things, speaking of flow, possibilities, and the multidimensional aspect of it. All these things show up, it seems, pretty much right in front of us, but we have a tendency to be looking toward the horizon for those kinds of things, and we miss those points of order, if you will, that are available right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how did you notice that difference, or did you even notice that or have that awareness of how the process was working for you in finding the flow?
So for me, what worked was letting go of control. So one of the things, and this is also related to anxiety and fear. One of the things that I noticed that creates anxiety and fear is to try to predict what happens and be very, very kind of in control. Okay, that's my plan and that's what's going to happen. Sometimes I don't know if it's going to happen. I fear it's not going to happen.
So your stress levels just exponential.
And I'm stressed and all that.
Yeah.
But when I try to think, okay, I believe that there are multiple possibilities for me. I have a lot of capabilities and I can give more to this planet and be rewarded for that as well. Then I just need to open up for possibilities. Continue. I'm not saying just sit back and not do anything.
Sure.
Continuing with what I'm doing right now, opening up, right? That's part of why I'm podcasting. Like I'm featuring podcasts, because it kind of opens up conversations and meeting new people and all that. And things will just introduce themselves to me. When I'm open to possibilities, the possibilities will introduce themselves to me.
Right. And there's a stark difference between the desire for control, because you're more constricted, you're not open, you're pushing and pulling energy as opposed to flowing. And then with the constriction, we eventually have to find the pause button. And inaction is sometimes actually taking action, being able to hit the pause button, wait patiently for that empathic resonance to become presence. And then that's when the flow actually, when you become aware that, okay, I'm finally in flow, right? And it's a very different internal awareness and sensation between the two, right? The anxiety is the closed, constricted, fearful, gut-wrenching kind of thing. And the letting go just relaxes all of that. And one thing that's, we focus on the past or the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. Speaking of the multidimensional aspects and kind of taking it to another level, and in speaking about the size of our aura, our energy, right? And one of the conversations I had with Dr. Laszlo was on a quantum physics level, where it said that we've got 99% space and we're 1% material. And he said, I would argue with that. We're 100% energy.
Mm.
There is really no material. Well, in that energy, how big is our field of influence, right? Which is equates to the aura, or how it's been presented. So there's this experiment that I was introduced to, gosh, I was in my early 30s, and it was using dowsing rods of all things, which are kind of a pseudoscience methodology, right? Their history of using dowsing rods for finding water and things like that. Well, this was a little different application. And so the person who, the woman actually was trained in shamanic training with the Hawaiian shamanism. But she said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to stand you in the corner. This was in a room that was somewhere between 30 and 40 foot square. And she said, I'm going to stand you in one corner. I'm going to go over in the other corner. I'm going to clear the rods and I'm going to walk towards you. And when the rods open, I will stop, have you open your eyes, and we'll mark the spot. And we're going to do it in 3 different ways. I'm going to have you focus on an event in the past, then one in the future, and then in the present. And in that process, she did the rods and went through her thing, and the past and the future opened up in pretty much the same place. And then in the present, she picked up a rock in the room, put it in my hand, said, okay, focus on this. And she barely got 2 steps in from the other side of the room. The past and the future opened up about 6 feet in front of me. Right. So here's this almost exponential difference in focusing in the past or the future, which is where the constriction, the stress, the control, all those kinds of things enter in. And then in the present, there's a huge difference. Well, and that was untrained as far as, I had a meditation practice, but I didn't have that awareness that produced the discipline to be habitual about being in that place, right? Profound. Imagine if we could do that, how that because you can't focus in the present without letting go of everything, right? That's where the flow exists. So in this, and it's a different way of explaining, right, what you went through from an energetic standpoint. And we don't often, like I say, we have those kinds of awareness, and if we start talking about it, folks think we're a little crazy. And yet the science in quantum physics now is beginning to prove that very truth. So how is that, do those kinds of things enter into your contemplation as you're looking to find that difference in serving self and serving others?
I think that I'm just, it's like trying to catch a signal, right? If I'm a cell phone, I'm trying to catch a signal. So I'm just opening up my antennas, and I'm trying to catch signals. And sometimes the signals are not the right signals, and I'm ignoring them. But sometimes they are. So I'll give you an example. There are 2 things that happened to me recently. One thing was, we have like a WhatsApp group of women who returned to Israel from different countries. And one of them posted, oh, I'm looking for a teacher assistant in an international marketing course I'm lecturing in one of the local universities. And I saw that. It's like, okay, that's me. And I don't know why, but I caught that signal and I said, that's connection. And I'm going to be a teacher assistant. I don't know what path it will take me, but I know that I want to connect with her because she made a huge impression on me. We met several times. I went to the university. I'm part of the staff now. So it opens up a brand new set of people and students and opportunities and experiences for me. Another thing that, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, and this may seem a little confrontational, but you diminished yourself when you said, I don't know why. Right? I think you do. right? That was the evidence of your attention, intention, and interaction showing up, and the signal gave you the, it was a green light as
Yeah.
opposed to yellow or red, right? So that's a tremendously valuable insight, not my reflection of it, but just how you processed that and how you put the, searching for signals framework around that, because that's actually true. I mean, we're all vibrations, so they're essentially, we're all signals to each other, and whether we have the empathic resonance with those signals or not, when we feel it, that's where the flow happens. And it's a fascinating discovery, I found.
Mm-hmm.
And that's part of why we're having this conversation, because I think others are having this experience and this discovery. And we need to share that, because we're in a critical time for our planet and people, to where, especially with this, last couple of years happening, and everybody being taught to be afraid of each other. Well, we're not built that way, right? So how do we come about and lose the notion that we can control? And granted, there are some ways that we do and can, and yet they aren't as fulfilling as what we intend. How do you see that coming about in your industry and working with women and things? Are there these kinds of notions as to, okay, yes, we can do this locally. Is there a way we can expand it? Is there a way we can serve others in a greater capacity? And what are the hopeful effects that might have long term?
Yeah. So with people I work with, I mean, I always ask them about thinking about the why. Why do they want to do something, right? Because a lot of time people tell me, oh, I want to, I don't know, get a promotion at work. I want to do this and that. And I always ask them why. Why is it so important for you? And what are you willing to sacrifice? And that raises an interesting discussion, because people don't always know why.
Right.
A lot of times it's external. It's completely external to them. Some expectations from others, or this is what society thinks they should do, or their company thinks they should do, or what have you. So
yeah,
they
there's
don't
a projection of safety and security in it, right?
Yeah. So they don't internalize their own motivations of why doing certain things, why choosing a certain path.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I try to do a lot of times. And that helps. That helps. Just asking yourself why, and what are you willing to do? What are you willing to do to make this happen in your life? Because a lot of times we think we want something, but we are not willing to pay the price.
Yeah. And what are the kinds of questions we're willing to ask? We were talking about teenagers and coaching and questions and things of that nature. As a teen, when I was first in college, at 18, I was in a pre-med program. And I had some serious questions. I was orphaned at birth, adopted. I understood all that. I had a great childhood, wonderful, unconditional love from my parents, nurturing, encouraging the curiosity to a point where it kind of went a bit too far for them. Never did for me. And yet, at that point in my life, in between first and second quarter, I was really distraught. And I actually knelt in prayer, and I prayed to know what truth was, and I was willing to die for it if necessary. Now that's a bit extreme, I'll have to admit. And yet, a few days later, I had this amazing experience of learning, being asked, first of all, if I was willing to die for what I believed in, and then having to confront, okay, what do I believe in? And I settled on cosmic consciousness, because it just felt full. I had other, things, but this felt full. So I said yes. And then I found myself, exiting my body and entering a light that felt like home, and yet collective intelligence, infinite intelligence. And yet I was still individuated in that, because I was thinking, and I realized I could think, so I knew it wasn't dead, right? And so then I had asked if there was more. Well, little did I know that that set me up to actually find out what my reason for being here was, and that was to help facilitate a new world order in my lifetime, which was one that's based on harmony and of people and planet, not the prescriptive one that's being propagated currently, or has been for a couple of decades now. But it gave me, it's like, oh, okay, what do I do now? Once I came back with that awareness. And so my whole life has been, okay, now how does this work? What do we find? How do I know? Who do I connect with? How are all these things that I was told were going to show up at their appointed time? How do I recognize those? How do I need to be prepared for it? And these are kinds of things that, with the questions you were asking, right, as to why you're making these choices, and what do you want to do with that, or how is that going to affect your life? Maybe even in the 40s, those questions begin to rise up. But do you find that there's a deeper awareness or questioning of what am I really willing to do in order, or give in order to have what it is I desire?
Yeah, I believe that every choice we make comes with the price tag. And we need to ask ourselves if we're willing to pay this price. And the price is not always, I'm not talking about money. It's our time, it's, I don't know, uncertainty, what have you. I mean, could be multiple prices.
Often we see it as sacrifice, but is it really? Right?
I see it as a price, not a sacrifice.
Okay.
I don't believe in sacrifice.
Well, that's what I'm saying. My point being, is that oftentimes we see this as sacrificing things that we might want to have done, but can't because we're going this direction. And we don't see that there's a way to include those various things, like you have, right? You have stated, oh, there's multiple things I could be doing. Why not? Right? You've got the skill, the talent, the ability, and the access. So why not engage it?
Exactly. Why not? Why not is a good question that they also like to ask. Why not?
Right. So how does that, in that development and your own awareness, because that's part of, we grow together, right? There's always this reciprocal student-teacher relationship that flips, right? And it maybe spirals as well. I don't know, maybe it even becomes a gyroscope at some time, right? With the two lines of force within it. So how did this affect your personal life and in the relationship that you had with your husband, and the conversations that you were having that you couldn't have elsewhere?
So I think that, first of all, working with other people, and as you said, teacher, student, I don't see that as a teacher student. I see that just as I'm coaching someone to make an impact in their life. I'm not a teacher. But a lot of times what happens in those conversations is that when I ask them questions and they think about it and answer different things, it helps me also think about it, how it's relevant to my life.
Exactly. That's my point. That's a teacher student kind of thing. It flips because you're also questioning, if you're really good at what you do as a coach, right? You're questioning your own self in relationship to what's going on with your client at the same time. Yeah.
So that's why I enjoy it so much, because every client, I mean, helps me get also better in my life.
Sure. That's the reciprocal aspect of being in a place of truly serving others, right? Because if you're doing it just for yourself, you don't get that kind of benefit because you don't have those kind of questions internally. You never consider them.
Mm-hmm.
So in those considerations, what have you found?
What I found. That there's that I'm just at the tip of the iceberg. That's what I found. That there's so much more. And there's so much I don't know what I don't know. So there's so much more.
So in that so much more, I'm sure you have some considerations of what those possibilities might be, right? What are some of the things that you consider that might sound a little bit crazy to others, or you know, I like the phrase, you have to be in to be sane.
I don't know if I sound crazy, but definitely people sometimes have a hard time understanding why do I just not take a job, a high-paying job.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to do one thing. I want to do multiple things, and I want to discover more about myself and about what I can do. And I like the diversity of things. So I consider different things. I consider public speaking to be paid to speak. And I consider, okay, I can teach, and I can teach in maybe higher education or elsewhere. I can help my coachees. I can do different things, as I said, with companies. So there's just, it stacks of more and more things I could do.
Isn't it wonderful with all the
It is.
choices?
It
Right?
is. It is.
It's like having a library of material, right? That you can not just reference, but you can actually engage and experience. And do you find that there's a golden thread that runs through it all? And what
So
would
for
that be?
so for me is, as I said, I'm open. I'm signaling, right? I mean, I'm sending a signal all the time. I'm looking for signals, and I'm willing to take risks and experiment. So it's like, the analogy is like, there are companies who sell a product that doesn't exist. Have you heard of, a lot of companies, they just market and sell something
Yeah,
that
we're going to
doesn't
come up with an
exist.
idea, and then we're going to go figure out how to create it.
Yeah, so a lot of times it happens to me too. I say, okay, I can do that. I don't know exactly all the details, but I know I'm capable of doing that. So I'm just going to sign myself up, and I will figure that out. So I'm willing to take risks and believe that I can do it, and just execute.
And that's the power in it. I have the same kind of I don't know, especially recently, 47 years of prep work after my initial experience, right? And I end up as the executive director for a global peace movement called Live and Let Live, right? Don't know, we've never had it, don't know if it can be done. It's a complete experiment. We've got some great simple precepts or principles in it that, and don't be an aggressor and be a good human. We understand what aggression is, and most of us, and yet there are some very insidious and almost surreptitious types of aggression that are still taking place in our population. And we all understand the notion of being a good human, but do we really? Right? We have, as you were talking, and this all these layers and opportunities that going deeper and understanding what that really means. Do we really know what being human means? And this is where you have found, it seems, and I'll just reflect from this place, that the power is in the fearlessness of moving into the unknown, because you've developed through your experience system, not your belief system, but you've developed through your experience system the knowledge that it works, right? And that nothing catastrophic will happen as a result, right? Which is what that fear is, right? That something catastrophic is going to happen. This is what's wonderful about the whole notion of apocalyptic chats, right? I would venture to say that 99 of 100 people, if you ask them what the apocalypse what apocalypse means, they'll say, oh, it's the end of the world, or something to that effect, when the word means nothing of the sort. It means unveiling knowledge or uncovering knowledge. So how are there things that you see from that perspective that have been so misunderstood that in your coaching and mentoring, you're discovering this in how others think and feel, and the transformation that basically needs to occur in order for them to step up into their full power, or at least more of their own power?
I think that it's several things. It's a lot about their limiting beliefs and unlocking their mind to possibilities. That the challenges that most people have is that they don't even allow themselves to think about something that is possible for them.
I had a
So
bumper
if you
sticker, critical thinking, our other national deficit.
So if you cannot think something is possible for you, how can you make it happen? You first have to think that it is something that is possible for you.
Mhm.
Then,
Dream
well,
a little bit, right? Dream a little bit.
Dream, imagine, yeah, meditate, and whatever works for you. I really like to ask people to imagine how their life can look like in a few years from now. I actually had a coachee that said, I can't imagine 5 years. I said, allow yourself to just dream about your life in 5 years. And don't know if it will look like that in 5 years, but just allowing yourself to think about possibilities. It opens your mind.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you think that in doing so, speaking of signals, right, and being in the present and attention, intention, and interaction, do you think, believe, maybe know that when you engage that process of imagining the future, that it sets it up for that flow?
I think that when you start imagining, and I really like imagination and kind of picturing in your mind, like how you look like and what you do and what is possible for you. Yes, it opens you up. It takes also intention. I mean, I think what happens is when you can imagine different things, but then you have to really make some kind of decision that you want that in your life.
Right, intentional. And then
yeah, you need to be intentional to some degree. Yeah, you may not know exactly what to do, and you may be scared as hell, and but at least you have to have some intention that, yes, this is something I want.
Yeah.
In
And
my
it's
life.
great that you acknowledge that, because that is a scary situation at any point, right? There's that, oh gosh, I don't know if it's, or it maybe seemed too big of a dream or whatever.
Yeah.
But what other choices do you have in life that to dream yourself or imagine yourself in your greatest capacity and then work towards it?
Yeah, and I think one of the challenges that people have is that if they dream about something and you say, oh, I want that in my life in 5 years or what have you, and then they are terrified because they have no idea how to make it happen. And I try to tell them, okay, don't be worried too much about how. Just think about the things that you do today and what step you can take that will be in the direction. I mean,
right.
Something you learn, some experience you have that will take you one step forward. Don't worry about the whole 5 year. I'm not a big fan of like making a 5-year plan, right? I mean, what am I gonna do each and every step of the way? Because you don't know what will happen. You can plan for, I don't know, for a few months, even maybe a year, but
well,
you
yeah,
don't know.
and in relation to what's just happened globally, right? We never expected that. We didn't know what was going to happen. Yet here it is, and it happened, and now we're coming out of it with a different aspect or reference point as to how we move forward. Now, as I'd mentioned before, in that process of attention, intention, and interaction, and allowing the universe, if you will, to kind of put those details together and present them to you as coincidences or synchronicities, however you want to look at it. In mentioning that, was there something in your life experientially where you remember that or a thought or intention that several years later manifested? I know personally I've had several of those. One in particular, dream come true, when I first started doing shows like this in 1990. I wanted to emulate two gentlemen, Bill Moyers and Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, hoping, dreaming someday that I might be worthy of an interview with one of them. 28 years later, it happened. Serendipitously, out of the blue, never expected it, but continued to do the things that were passion-filled and fulfilling in my life toward that direction. Not that I was actually pursuing the interviews. I didn't really think about that. I just continued to have that intention of being worthy, right, at some point. Have you had anything like that?
So I don't know if something as big as what you described, but I remember that when I started my career, and I was a young engineer, and I was looking at the manager that I had back then, and I was so impressed with how he was handling people and navigating different personalities and working with multinational teams. And I was just at the beginning of my career, and I said, wow, I want to be him one day. I mean, I want to be able to be like him one day.
Right.
And this one day eventually happened. I reached that level, I think, maybe 15 years later. But I think just knowing that this is what I want to become something, my own version of him, obviously my own version.
So
yeah.
When you first had that inkling, right, do you remember, if you could just kind of imagine going back to that place and the kind of sense that you had with that thinking, right? Was it something that was really impactful, that you considered for a length of time, or was it something that just seemed more native to you and popped up as a feeling of possibility that could really work, right? And those moments, to me, in my own reflection of my events, are kind of innocent, naive, right, of not knowing, and yet having that desire, the intention of being in that place from a very deep, for lack of a better, place in your own consciousness. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I had the desire. I don't know how much to say the intention, because I was completely not even close, right, to getting there. But I had the desire, and I think a strong internal feeling that this is what I should become eventually.
Okay.
I didn't think about it day in, day out. I didn't even know how I'll get there.
That was my point. Was it something that just occurred in the moment and you went, oh yeah, right? And it just felt full for that moment.
It felt right. It felt like, it felt right.
And then you let it go. And this is how, because in exploring consciousness and understanding how the universe, how creation works, and our ability to be co-creators in it, and even creators for ourselves. We're not islands, right? That's what because we co-create everything. We miss that. There's not, it's almost like mystery school kind of information and knowledge, and the technologies, the psychospiritual technologies that are available for us to actually engage this, that have been unavailable, or maybe not unavailable, but not pursued in trying to understand, this true multidimensionality you mentioned earlier of life and living, and how many, how much we're connected to in the process. And if we're all energy, then we're connected to everything. So how do we utilize that understanding and then put our attention, intention, and interaction in the appropriate place that's necessary for us to find that natural evolutionary path that really is deep within us to begin with, that as we explore ourselves, we kind of uncover that in finding the flow. Does that sound consistent with your experience?
Yeah, I think that back then, I knew that that's what I want in my life. I put it kind of, as in a drawer, right, in my mind, right? I just put it in a drawer. And when there was some incident that happened, some trigger, I started thinking about it again. So a few years later, I was promoted to a staff engineer, and it was like kind of a split in the road in the career path between a manager and an engineer. So the staff engineer was towards a very technical individual contributor path. And when that happened, I remember, my manager back then called me, and she told me, "Oh, congratulations, you're promoted." And I was sad. Happy and sad at the same time. And I was happy, promoted is a nice thing, people appreciate what I do, but I was like, that's not what I want. And I opened the drawer, right? This is what I want. This is what I want to, and this is not aligned. It took me some time to get there, because I had to get some experiences as working with clients, as leading others. I had to have some experiences before another opportunity came a few years later to manage a team. So it was kind of, always in my subconscious that this is what I wanted. And I just had to tap into that in different, in different situations in my life.
What I hear you saying is that the layers of construction were such that you needed these other aspects of understanding industry, people, process, right, in order to move you into that next level. This was temporary and transitory, as all experiences are, and yet it gave you the food, if you will, or gave you a meal that helped you continue your journey.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now, reflecting on that, and these are like some amazing reflections, and clearly entering into those other dimensions of reality and awareness that many have, that I think we don't necessarily engage to a great degree. And if we did more in seeking that harmony in our own lives, I've heard it that time is a measurement of the change of entropy. So if you can imagine being in more harmony and balance with yourself, the entropy is going to be gone. It'll take you less time to get what you need or want. Imagine that on a global scale. We might actually advance to a point where we can all get along and open ourselves up to other worlds, because we're not being addressed yet, because we're still barbaric in nature. I mean, when you're still fighting each other for territory and resources, it's inconsistent with harmony. Now, harmony doesn't necessarily mean the lack of chaos. It means the proper management of it, because chaos is just patterns we don't recognize yet. Right? And if everything's perfect, which we assume it to be because we profess it, right? We've got to get that idea from someplace. And yet that seems to be in the core of pretty much everything. And us, when we think about the greater reality, right? What have you noticed that might be a really good piece of advice for a daily practice or a daily engagement in whatever direction that you're going, and whatever, without restriction towards anyone, anything, or direction, or any separative notions, right?
So I really believe that you need to give yourself the space to allow possibilities. And every person is different, so I don't have like one solution that fits everyone. I always share that what helps me is exercise. So I like running, and the reason for that is that the physical exercising and like making it extremely physically hard helps me, because I can't, I just let it's like when people meditate and they like free their mind from everything else. For me, running is like meditation, because I run and I cannot, I have to like, right, I have to survive, I have to kind of, so I don't think about,
Right.
all the different things on the daily basis. And it allows me to think about other things.
Sure, it allows your body, your mind, your autonomic system, if you will, to be distracted by the physical activity in order to free your mind to explore.
Yeah.
And I think, even with meditation, the Hindus have what is it? Bhakti yoga, which is called a walking meditation kind of thing, where it doesn't really matter. You don't have to be still. You don't have to be physically still to meditate. Right? And as you have found your way of meditating, we all have our different ways, and you're right, we've all got, we're as different as snowflakes, and so we've all got different ways. Concepts are consistent, the experience of them are always different, and yet we often come to very similar conclusions, as you mentioned, in just being able to let go, find that quiet stillness, ability to consider possibilities first.
Yeah.
So what is there? So that's the physical side of it, and how you free yourself. Is there a mental process that you could offer that might go along with that? You mentioned it that frees your mind, but is there something?
So the mental process that I ask people to do is doing some imagination exercise, and they can do it in multiple ways. Either going through some guided meditation, or listening to some music of their choice, whatever helps them, right, to relax and opening minds.
And music is the ultimate language, right?
Yeah.
It goes.
So for me, by the way, I like very high beat electronic music. Usually, right, meditation is like slow. That drives me nuts. Like I need something else completely. So music, whatever works for them, and or some guided meditation. Some people like to listen to someone, tells them what, to think, or, some guidance to opening up and thinking about possibilities. And I also like vision board or anything visual that I let people just, okay, do an exercise and try to pick some pictures that represent things you want in your life. Maybe you have some, maybe some you really want to have. Just open up your mind and don't think about it too much. Just whatever catches you, just pick it. Can be with some magazines, or it can be, Pinterest or whatever,
Sure.
something digital.
Sure.
And that's a great exercise because it allows, and it depends. Each person connects to something different.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
the beauty of it.
Yeah. I found, I went through a guided process years ago called the multi-plane awareness. It was developed by William Swigard back in the mid-50s. And it is a process, and talk about it, we're going to go out on the fringe for just a moment. It's a process of accessing and integrating the multiple bodies that we have across various planes of consciousness. I realize that's way out there for most people. And yet I had a direct experience of it that was very real. And so thousands of others. Well, I tried to find an audio version of it online for probably a decade and a half and couldn't find it. So I've created one of my own. So that it is something that, viewers may be interested if you want to go that far to explore that kind of, and it's not just a mental framework, and yet it is, right? Because you're looking at, here's another construct that may have, and it may be reality. It was, and several decades later, there was actually a quantum physics paper written that seemed to edify that construct, and it's guys Nepi and Close. It's called the triadic dimensional distinction vortical paradigm. Long name, but they essentially say that consciousness, space, and time are tethered across 9 planes of consciousness, or 9 dimensions, which oddly enough, here was 30 years of looking for some scientific proof that the experience I had does have a science explanation to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's valuable. That's what we seek, right? Is that cross-reference to where we can say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. And that gives us a way to engage or embrace an experience that we had no way of explaining during that shows up later, right? The coincidence of how reality works and how it presents to us in multiple ways. And I love how you have framed the kind of trifecta, right? You have the experience, the physical motion and movement to bring you in, the music, and then the thinking, right? And how that all fits together to help explore and expand one's own ability to be more than they are. From considering that today or even in the next moment. So in this and this has been just an absolutely wonderful conversation that we entered into it. Neither one of us had an idea where it was going to go, and yet it's been a lot of familiar places, right, in the sharing of how we've kind of said the same thing differently, and yet had similar experiences that edify. Yeah, this is possible, and don't believe us, try it. Right?
Yeah.
So in parting, because we're kind of coming to a close, what do you think is the most important aspect of what we've talked about, or what maybe we haven't talked about yet, that you could offer for others to consider in co-creating or creating their own futures?
I think that what I always tell to people is that don't be bound by titles and society. We are kind of, everyone wants to fit us in a box. That's how society works, the modern society, right? Look at, everyone has a title. I don't like to use a title, to be honest with you. I don't like to be titled because I feel like not one title can describe me.
Right.
And that's why I try
to
encourage.
Describe a frequency or a vibration or a signal, right? How do you describe that?
Yeah. So I try to encourage people to really not put themselves in a box and believe that there is way more things for them in life, but they have to first imagine themselves getting there. Imagine possibilities, or at least some possibilities, because a lot of times we cannot imagine all the possibilities we have.
Open the door.
Yeah. Open a door for possibilities. Exactly.
Awesome. Limor, it's gosh, parting is such sweet sorrow. I really appreciate the value that you bring to others in life and to this conversation. It's been wonderful. And I'm looking forward to being able to share that.
Yeah, thank you. I really enjoyed our conversations, and
Awesome. And I look forward to crossing paths again.
yeah,
And,
for sure.
it'll be wonderful as we expand and grow and support world peace, harmony,
Absolutely.
together. Super
Absolutely.
awesome. And namaste and in la catch. And thank you for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. I know you've enjoyed the conversation. I'm Zen Benefiel, and I will see you next time.